Hi, so for the first video tutorial in this lesson on the animated GIF, I'm going to show you an automated online GIF animator called ImgFlip. It is one of many out there. I'm using ImgFlip for a couple reasons. Number one, it's free. Number two, it's platform agnostic. Doesn't matter whether you're using a Mac or PC. In a moment, I'll show you a couple others that either cost money or are Mac specific that are very popular. I'm also using ImgFlip because it's a good way to illustrate some of the fundamental things you're going to need to be aware of if you're building GIFs, no matter the platform. And the remaining tutorial videos will all use Photoshop to build GIFs. But these same fundamental things are what you need to manage to really create GIFs that technically are strong and creatively or stylistically are strong. They are the frame rate for the GIF, the overall dimensions for the GIF, the overall file size for your GIF, and the looping behavior of the GIF. So before we get started on sort of building a GIF, let me just show you a few tools just to be aware of. So this is ImgFlip, and we'll come back to this. And this is the one I'm going to use today. GIF Brewery is another very, very popular one. I'm not showing this today because it costs a whopping $5, but it's Mac specific. But this one sort of is a step more sophisticated in what it will allow you to do in terms of creating GIFs compared to ImgFlip. So this is one that's recommended, but again, it's Mac specific. Flixel makes a whole suite of graphic programs for animated GIFs or cinemagraphs, which we talked a little bit about, or I introduced in one of the earlier lessons. But essentially, cinemagraphs blend photos and video in a sort of one order of magnitude more complex than you get with your average GIF. And this costs about $100 for the basic package, but it really approaches Photoshop in the creative control and the technical quality of the GIFs you can produce. We'll go back to ImgFlip in a minute. Let me show you what we're going to do. So I'm going to make a simple animated GIF from this video clip. And this clip was shot in Libya a couple years ago. This gentleman, let me play it for you real quickly. This gentleman is a weaver in the old city of Tripoli. He's almost 90. He started weaving when he was a kid, weaves mostly rugs. So we used him as part of a broader story to his sort of perspective on Libya, on a changing Libya. And of course, because he's been around for so long, he not only saw Gaddafi, but the predecessors to Gaddafi. So you can imagine a GIF created from this small video file as part of a multimedia package, as kind of a creative placeholder or tool to illustrate how mundane and how repetitive making rugs actually is. Another thing to note is a lot of times when I'm making GIFs, this video clip is from a much larger and longer video file. But I will try and use any program. In this case, I think it was iMovie, but it could be Premiere, it could be Final Cut, just to cut the video clip to close to the portion that I'm going to use for my animated GIF. The reason for doing this is Photoshop or any online GIF animator is going to have a hard time managing video files. Video files are very large. So it's just going to take it longer to process everything. Every step's going to, it's going to chug away for a few seconds as it responds to the commands I give it. So if I start with a smaller file, I tend to be more economical of time as I move through creating my GIF. The other thing for this GIF is, I don't need the audio, so I remove the audio track from these. In some GIFs, the audio may work for you, or you may wish to do an audio overlay. So back to ImgFlip. Like many online automated GIF makers, ImgFlip is really designed to be a social site, and what it's sort of aiming to do as its business model is use GIFs as memes, GIFs as sort of playful conversation points to create dialogue on a social site. We're asking a little bit more from our animated GIFs. We want to tell a little bit more sophisticated stories. We want to use them for journalistic purposes. But ImgFlip, the free version, is a good basic tool for me to illustrate some of the fundamental things you need to be aware of when creating GIFs. You can pay for the pro version, and it will allow you to make much larger, much more image rich, image rich and higher quality GIFs. But let's get started here. So I'm going to make a GIF from a video file. I could, if I wished, grab clips or sections from online videos, and here, YouTube is its example, but I'm going to upload this original GIF that I just showed you. And you can see it's processing the GIF right now. It's processing the video to make it into a GIF, and were this a much larger file, it would take it even longer. So while it's doing that, this is kind of the basic landscape here. So this slider, which is associated with this preview window, and different GIF programs are going to sort of allow you to do the same basic things in slightly different presentations. But I can choose the in point for my GIF, and I can choose the out point. Now this 10-second clip is, I've already sort of trimmed it from beginning to end, so I'm going to use the whole video. I won't go through all these other features, but I just want to point out some of those that are really kind of relevant to what you're going to need to be aware of. And one of them, I mentioned the overall sort of dimensions of the GIF. In other words, how big the GIF is going to appear on the screen. And this number is giving you the pixels along the longest edge. So again, for the free version, I can't make it any larger than about 360 pixels along the longest edge, but you may, depending on how you want your GIF to present, to be much larger than that. And the pro version of ImgFlip or Photoshop or Flixel or any animator will allow you some control of that. So that's an important feature. Another related feature here is the frames per second. So very quickly, if you are playing a video, what makes a video is the number of frames, the number of sort of cycles per second. And typically for videos online, it ranges anywhere from 24 to 30. There are exceptions. Frames per second. Part of what makes a GIF is that you're actually sort of removing a lot of those frames. You're reducing the frame rate dramatically. And you can see, so this is telling me this is playing at about 5.4 frames per second. And it's orange. But as I sort of reduce the overall file size, and this is sort of unique to ImgFlip, and I won't spend a lot of time explaining this now, but as I get to about 10 frames per second, it's going to turn green. And what it's telling me is at about 10 frames per second, I'm going to get a relatively smooth image flow. Less than 10 frames per second with the orange, it's indicating that you're going to see a little bit of choppiness. And that's okay for our purposes now. Again, I just want to make you aware of that. The other things that are important here, just to be sensitive to, is the overall file size. So this is telling me that the overall file of the GIF I'm going to create is about 3.5 megabytes. Depending on the number of frames, depending on the length of the GIF, depending on a lot of factors, your GIFs could be much larger than this. And if you're doing cinemagraphs, the only thing I would kind of warn you of is, as a general rule, you should try and keep your GIFs under about 5 megabytes. In other words, if people are watching these with not the greatest internet, depending on the browser and how the browser manages photo files and GIFs by extension, if you want it to play smoothly as intended, you should try and keep your GIF size under about 5 megabytes. A couple other kind of features here to be aware of. You can, let me show you this one first. So you can crop a GIF. So this is, you can see it would allow me, and I'm just not going to do it, to crop this frame, and it will apply, and most GIF animators will do this for you. Whatever crop you apply to your preview frame, it will apply to the remaining frames. So if you wanted to crop your video when you're making your GIF, you can do that. ImgFlip and some other animators will allow you to add text, and I'll add text here. And I just want to show you this. You can also sort of control the in point and out point for when the text appears. And I'm going to leave this. I'm going to let it demonstrate in the video, in the GIF. But I think for a lot of aesthetic reasons, this is not the greatest thing in the world. And we'll come back to that in later lessons. So a few more options here. Again, most of these have to do with ImgFlip specifically, and how, if you were using the Pro version, it would let you dramatically enlarge the file size, the number of frames per second. You can control the speed of your GIF. That's important with GIFs too, in terms of presentation. You may be Part of what you may want to do with a GIF is slow down a very fast behavior so people can see it more clearly. You may want to speed up a very slow behavior. That will allow you to do it. Another important feature with GIFs in terms of looping behavior and presentation is the number of times it will loop. Typically we think of GIFs as looping sort of endlessly, but advertisers, or in some cases for editorial purposes, you may want the GIF to just loop once, twice, 3 times so that it's clear to the viewer, but it's not looping continuously, because that can be annoying or distracting on a page. The last thing I want to show, and this is a nice feature built into ImgFlip, but you can do this in effect manually in Photoshop, is when you have a clip that loops perfectly. So the behavior of the GIF is, you can set it up to seamlessly loop. You can use this four-verse feature. And in effect, what's happening here is it's playing your GIF from the first frame to the last frame, then reversing it, playing it from the last to the first, and then again from first to last, and sort of endlessly, depending on how many times you're having it loop. The advantage of this is it will help that GIF not appear quite as choppy and help the loop appear more smoothly. If you're making a GIF where what you're trying to illustrate doesn't loop perfectly, seamlessly, this is just going to be confusing. It's going to play forward and backward and forward and backward. But if you've got something that's a perfect loop, this is great. And again, you can do this manually in Photoshop, and we'll have a look at that later. But I'm going to leave that checked here. Some of these other things, you can title, you can tag your GIFs. There are assorted privacy settings. These are, depending on what you're trying to do with your GIF and where you want to present it, these are all things you're going to want to try and control. So now I'm going to generate the GIF. And because it's a relatively small file size, this is going to happen pretty quickly. And there it is. You can see it sort of playing in this little preview window. And ImgFlip, like most animators, will sort of give me a link to where it appears on that site. It will give me an HTTPS code to be used in forums. It will give me the HTML code, sort of the href, the image reference, so I can embed this. I could drop this into either a WordPress instance or code I'm creating. It will also allow me to download the image, which is what I'm going to do. And as soon as it has downloaded, I'm going to play that GIF. And I'm just going to play my sample GIF here, and it downloaded it to my desktop in my browser. And I can do this just by dragging it to the browser. And there you have it. And again, this is a very small, low-resolution version, but I wanted to use this to illustrate some of those fundamental things that you need to begin to control. And again, ImgFlip was just a nice, easy, free tool with which to begin to explore GIFs. We'll talk about a little bit more about sort of GIF behavior and how GIFs interact with browsers and what you can learn from GIFs by how you open them in browsers or in preview windows in the next video tutorial.